There's so many people who've been defined by their titles, career, companies are now being laid off.
Leaders are sometimes forgetting is it's about trusting your employees.
If your CEO left today and put you in charge for a month, could you run the business? The average CIO lifespan is like 3 to 5 years. And the reason why is because
So most CIOs spend years building credibility, and sometimes one security event can erase it overnight. But the thing is, sometimes that's where real transformation begins. So picture this. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. It's Monday. The phone's buzzing and you get a notification that all systems are down. So we talk a lot about digital transformation, but we don't oftentimes talk about what happens after trust breaks. So Antonio is our guest today. He's an IT vet, former VP of infrastructure, security, and systems. And he's one of the few leaders who's really turned a post-crisis governance into a foundation of growth. So Antonio, welcome to Heartbeat.
thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here.
Fantastic. So I'm really curious. I've heard this thing called making moves Monday. And I'm really curious. Can you share with me where this came from, what it is, and what the story is behind it?
Yeah, so one of the people that I follow had this saying TGIM, which is thank God it's Monday. And the premise behind that is everybody kind of looks forward to the end of the week. And so in the weekend, so we can kind of relax and, enjoy the weekend with family or friends or whatever that is. But it's also symbolizes the end of the work week for most people. And then most people dread Mondays. And I started to think about this, when writing my book, I started to think, I talked a lot about like planning is important. I talked a lot about starting, the right way is important. And then it just kind of hit me like, man, we start every week off hating the first day of the week. And so most of the first day of the week, our mind isn't sharp. We're counting down to Friday, those things that kind of can mentally push you backwards. And so now you're spending your time on the back end trying to double work or catch up, right? Because Mondays have pretty much been seen as the worst day of the week for most people because it's coming out that weekend. And I wanted to reshape people's mindset around this. Like, hey, what if you started out Monday with purpose, with passion, with goals, and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to look at it different. I'm not going to look at it as a dreadful day that gets me out of the weekend. I'm going to look at the start to completing things to look forward to the weekend and then just kind of set the tone for the weekend that way. It's really a mindset shift that I'm trying to get people to understand that, hey, every day is a day of progress and purpose and passion. Anytime day you waste, you're going to have to catch up later on in the week. So let's just make Monday a day of making moves.
Fantastic. So if I could encapsulate, it's almost like moving with intention on Monday.
Yes, absolutely.
So what are some things that CIOs and people that are in charge of the business can do from a tactical point of view on a Monday morning to really set that tone for the week?
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest asset that anybody has in a leadership role is their people. And most of the time on Mondays, we are so focused on scheduling meetings and working on charts and graphs and analytics and getting ready for a presentation that we oftentimes forget about the people. So I think one of the first tactical things you can do is check on your people, right? Make sure they're good. Make sure they do have clearly defined goals of what they're trying to achieve. Make sure they're modeling the behavior that you think they ought to model as well. And the second thing I would add to that is be purposeful when you're in these meetings. And a lot of times we're in these meetings with our counterparts and we got our laptops and we're checking emails and we're sending Teams messages. And, a lot of times we don't really speak unless we're spoken to. And I like to tell, especially executive leaders, you're not really an IT person anymore. You're a business partner. And so I asked you the question, if your CEO left today and put you in charge for a month, could you run the business? Not IT, the business. And so Monday should be an intentional time that you spend with your colleagues, that you spend with your team to make sure that you're all aligned, make sure everybody has the same common goals, and make sure you have an understanding of what the business is trying to do that week and how IT fits into that.
So we've gone through a few interesting years where it was everyone was in the office and then everyone left the office and everyone worked remote. Now we're back to almost like a hybrid, and some companies are almost forcing their employees to come back and have a more flexible structure. What have you seen, and is there a perfect model someone can emulate?
So I think what I've seen is kind of a combination of both. We're in an interesting dynamic where not only is the nature of work changing, but also the talent that's coming in is changing. And it's a topic that we don't like to talk about, but this next generation doesn't work like we work, right? That's just the nature of the beast. Every generation says that about their generation. Hey, you guys don't do hard work. And so what I've kind of seen is this bag of, hey, we want to get people back into the office because that's what we're used to. That's what we are accustomed to doing pre-COVID. That's what I feel comfortable in doing. And then I also see this resistance of, well, wait, I'm just as productive at home as I can be if I'm in the office. I'll speak for my team now. In the office, they're less productive. because they have so many people walk up to them, hey, I need help with this. Can you help me with this? And so half of their day is spent with drive-bys, right? People just showing up. And I'm like, well, that's not helping them be productive being in the, so they actually work better when they're remote. And I think it comes down to this. What production are you looking for from your team? And what's the best way they can be productive? If it's in office, then fine, that's in office. If it's not, then let it be remote. I don't like doing it for the sake of doing it, because you also send a bad message. You send a message like, hey, I don't trust you at home. I'm going to micromanage you to make sure I'm walking around and I got eyes on you. I can visibly see you. Don't get me wrong. There's collaboration that gets lost when you're always remote, right? But I think as leaders, this is where I lean into leaders. I think as leaders, that's your job to find creative ways to maintain that collaboration, to maintain that synergy. And so you as a leader should be coming up with ideas and thoughts around, hey, how do we get the team to perform as a team and at their best with the cards that we've been dealt?
You said something I think is quite profound, which is trust. I
Mhm.
think that is probably the key word that leaders are sometimes forgetting is it's about trusting your employees and for them to make the right decision on where they're going to produce and provide the best work product. And there are times where at home makes sense. And there's times where going to an office is the absolute best move. And I think it's creating a place where you're allowing those conversations to take place in the hallways and you're creating a place where, even if you're getting your work done at home to create the places where those relationships can be brought together, because that's where some of the best ideas are born. It's
Absolutely.
where you're trying to figure out the path on solving a problem. And so before going back to main question of, how do you recover from a disaster? Here's a question for you. How does the new generation learn from the older generation where they're not able to necessarily listen in to how senior leaders have solved a problem because either the senior leader has an office where they can't overhear, there's
Mhm.
just not as much mentorship as I think there was in the past. Now we're seeing things like AI where those times with, maybe someone would have asked for help, it's now being done using different tooling. How can we bridge that gap? Do you have any insight?
Yeah, so I think it starts with intentionality, right? It goes back to what I originally said about Mondays. You have to have an intention and a purpose in building these relationships. They're just not going to organically happen. I think one of the things that leaders can always do is just remember when you first started, right? And remember, most of us pretty much all share the same story. Somebody saw something in us, they believed in us, they made sure that we had everything we need. I honestly feel like that's gotten lost in my generation where we're so focused on moving up the corporate chain, we're so focused on our own individuality that we've kind of forgotten to reach back and pull somebody else up, right? And so I think there has to be some intention around that, intention around identifying who's going to take my place. I like to say this. I don't like the hit by a bus analogy. That's so cringe. I like to say, if you hit the lottery, right, who's going to replace you? And if you don't have identified that person, you should probably be looking to do that now. So there's a level of intentionality that has to be there. And I also think with that intentionality, there has to be purpose behind it. So one of the things that I do when I bring on interns, new junior leaders, or anybody of that nature that I feel like has some capabilities to be in a leadership role, I let my organization know, like, hey, once a month, this person is going to be on a call with us, right? Because I want them to hear what we talk about. We have this talented individual who has a skill set that's beyond our knowledge because they've been writing code since the fourth grade, right? Because of the way schools are going now. So they're highly skilled, but they don't understand business, acumen. That's my job, right? And so I reached out to leadership and said, hey, on some of our calls, on some of our board prep meetings, they're going to sit in because I want them to hear the level of conversations. I want them to hear how decisions are being made. I want them to understand how business actually works. And once I've done that, the business buys in. So, oh, that's great. I'm so glad you identified some talent. And it kind of shows that back to that trust. It developed that trust, like, hey, I see something in you. The same way somebody saw something in me, then I think I want you to be a part of this. So I think number one is some intentionality. Number two, it has to be some purpose. It just can't be, hey, I'm intentional about getting you this information, but I'm going to leave it alone. Create a program, create a platform where they can see you, they can learn from you, whether that's Zoom or in person, right? You do that, right? So they can understand, like, and then you follow up. Hey, what do you think about that meeting? What resonated with you? It's like, oh my God, I didn't know you guys had to go through this much to get a decision made. I didn't know these many departments need to be involved. I just had a one-track mind of like, why don't we do it this way? And it just brings some awareness to how we operate as business leaders. And I think that's going to be one of the things that can help bridge the gap between this generation and the next.
I think it's so well said. And, reminds me of, I went to school in Denmark for my grad school, and they had an interesting path where in, I guess, their sophomore year, they give the students a chance to either go down the path of academia or to go into the trades. And a lot of the male students would say, listen, I don't really want to put my nose into a book for the next, 8 years. And it's not about money because everyone goes to school for free. And so there's a decision point where there's encouragement from the parents, from the families, from the overall community to say, if academics is not for you, there's another path where you can actually get your hands dirty. And they've started to bridge that more into the technical IT side of things because there's a lot of need for actually development and coding and building things where there's no educational material available for it yet because it's developing in real time. And so my question is, in this new world of AI where things are shifting daily and schools, for the most part, are so far behind
Yeah.
that they have no structure and they're almost trying to ban the use of a lot of these tools. Do you think there's going to be a new class of student who doesn't necessarily go down the traditional 4-year degree school, but can bring something to the market that is fundamentally a different shift and therefore bring something to companies when they join that we're not even aware of yet?
Yeah, I absolutely think that's the case. I think one of the things that we're so afraid of the AI term, and I think there's been a lot of negative talk around AI. We're so afraid of it that we're not willing to embrace the components that can work for us. And I think this next generation has zero fear. I mean, their life has been, like I said, they've been in digital transformation their entire life. You got 2-year-olds who want to work on an iPhone now, better than I do. And so all their life, they're used to digital, they're used to change, they're used to how things operate at a rapid pace. They're used to, as bad as social media is, there are also some good traits that come out of that's teaching kids some things that they can utilize in the workforce. I think once we as leaders get over the fear monger of what AI can't do and start tapping into what it can do, I think we'll start to see a fundamental shift into how we approach AI and how we allow the next generation or these AI experts or students or whatever you want to call them, allow them the platform to be creative. And I say that because my first role when I started in IT in 1999 was prepping for Y2K. We were terrified to death of Y2K. Nobody knew what was going to happen, right? But they entrusted a 22-year-old, hey, figure out how to get our system. We've never seen this before, but you figure out how to get our systems to the point where we are not going to be losing all of our data in, at the stroke of midnight, right? Now, obviously, we know nothing happened in Y2K, but the point is they allow that young person the ability to figure it out. And most of our lives, those of us who are old enough grow up, hey, I remember when the internet first came out and how everybody was afraid. And I remember I remember the transition from office phones to these big cell phone blocks to these now. I remember these conversations and there was a lot of fear around these things as well. The only difference was people were more open to, hey, go explore this new technology. Go figure this out. I'm going to send you to a conference. They're going to talk about something that's not coming out for 3 years. Go learn it. Right. And now figure out how you can bring it to our organization. I honestly think leaders have gotten lazy and they just have stopped wanting to do the hard work. We've kind of made it to our titles and our roles, and we've kind of sat back and said, okay, I've arrived. I'm done. Right. And there's moments where you got to say, hey, no, this is coming in the next 4 years. Go figure this out now. So when 4 years happens and we're not, we don't have a choice at that point, then we're ready to move forward with the talent that we have.
And I think those companies that allow and once again trust their employees to
Yeah.
use the tools within some safeguards, some governance structure around, this is what you can and cannot use,
Yeah.
don't upload proprietary information, be careful. I think those companies are truly going to be successful. And I think for this reason, if you know how to solve a problem because you solved it 1,000 times, you're going to take the same approach.
Yep.
If you have no idea how to solve the problem, you're going to go and bring something to the table that might be quite unique. And this leads me to when I hear of companies banning AI or schools banning AI because they're afraid of someone using it. I think instead of banning the tool, it's around how do you qualify that the person understands. And so
Mhm.
I heard this professor that said, I don't really care what tools you use to generate your paper, but you have
Mhm.
to, at the end of the day, stand up and defend it.
Yes.
And so if you don't understand it, it's not the tool's problem. It's
Yep.
because you didn't do the work in understanding your output.
Yes.
I think it's that same approach of use whatever is available and come up with some creative problem solving. But at the end of the day, you have to understand and defend it. And I
Yes.
think that's where you're going to be able to bring together generations because someone who understands the nuances and someone who takes a different approach can now partner up together and bring a unique way of thinking
Yep.
that fundamentally shift the business. And so I think there's this desire for almost a mentor a mentee type of a relationship again, where maybe it needs to be structured differently than in the
Mhm.
previous model. But
Yep.
if there's a huge opportunity, what are your thoughts?
I think you're absolutely correct. It's funny when you were talking, you just talking about to grammar school, and I talk about AI in a way because, like I said, fear mongering around, and I don't really get because we've always, especially in technology, times change every day. There's always something new that comes up. And when you're speaking, it got me to think about sitting in a math class, right? And the teacher saying, "Hey, I don't care if you use a calculator, but you got to show your work, right?" So it's the same. So we're not new to this concept of like, "Hey, I don't care if you use a device to get the answer, but you still got to show me how you got the answer, right?" For whatever reason, we've allowed our minds to have this buzzword that kind of makes us act like we've never done. And it's like, wait, I've been showing my work ever since I was in the third grade when I started doing my times tables, right? Like, yeah, I can pull out the calculator and I know 3 times 3, but I still got to actually know what that means to your point. I got to be able to articulate how did I come to that answer? And I think it's just us kind of relaxed. I think we've created some of the fear mongering. And I think it's us as leaders starting to relax and say, guys, because we've done this before. We've kind of been doing this all of our life. Let's not make this bigger than what it is. Let's embrace it. And to your point, I don't really care if you use ChatGPT to write the paper. Just make sure you can tell me what the paper was about. You can explain to me in detail. If I ask you a question that's not in the paper, can you articulate it in a way where I could say, hey, you know what? ChatGPT may have wrote 80% of that, but gosh, he knows that paper. I think the other big component of this is as leaders, don't be afraid to say and show, hey, I go speak for a living now because of my book. My speeches now, I can just throw my book manuscript into the, say, write me a 45-minute speech based on my book around this topic. And it's going to take my words from my book, right? Right up. I don't have any qualms about saying, yeah, I use for my speech. It's my words that it's pulling from, but I don't want to sit there and type a 45-minute speech when I can just get it in 30 seconds and then I could just, hone it in and perfect it to how I want it to be. So I think it's important as leaders that we also say, yes, I'm embracing AI and technology. I'm using it in my company to look at spreadsheets and how I can forecast what's the next quarter going to be. And I'm using it in a usable manner that's beneficial. We got to stop being afraid to say that so we can make it feel like it's okay to use it in a responsible light to help us drive business value.
I think it actually could almost bring back the humanness to things again.
Yes.
'Cause if you can get rid of the busy work, just using your analogy of the book, well, imagine if instead of preparing or writing a speech, you created a place for those in the audience to be able to actually get up and ask a question, to engage with you in the content. That to me is so much more valuable
Yes.
than hearing someone regurgitate a book that I could have. I
Yes.
want to know the nuances. I want to hear the stories. Tell me what
Yes.
things that happen behind. And so moving into this next section, when we look at times that, there's been a breach of trust, there's been
Mhm.
something that has gone fundamentally wrong. Can you walk us through what that situation was and kind of take us back to that experience and then what you did with that?
Yeah, so we were breached. It actually had been sitting on our server for a while. We didn't have the proper security controls in place. We're a small organization, so we were limited from a budget perspective. And so we were breached and it took us down and we were almost out of business. And we ended up having to take 7 days, I believe, or something like that to recover from that attack. And obviously trust was lost. There's this, hey, you're paid to protect the environment. And this happened. We were unprotected, we were unaware, and we were unprepared, I think, more than anything. And so we got back restored, right? And one of the things that I learned in that moment, and one of the things that I actually did it, but I don't know if I did it as aggressive as I needed to be, is companies make decisions around security based on how much it can impact their business operationally. And so I learned at an early age, you don't talk tech or security to leaders, you talk business value. Right. And I had done that, but I hadn't done that in an aggressive manner. I was kind of new to the company and I didn't really sit down and say, hey, if you make this decision, here's the risk associated with that. And this is what could potentially happen if something would. I just want you guys to be aware if this ever happens, this is what this actually means for the business. So while we may be saving, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000 because we don't want to purchase the product or the tool that's going to help us be more secure, it's going to cost us 300,000 if we lose the data. Right. And when we had this incident, somebody brought it back. She's like, man, you said this was going to happen to us. I was like, yeah, I did. But I was like, but that's nobody's fault. Now's not the time to blame. I think one of the things about regaining trust is take accountability. Like I just said, hey guys, I said it, but I didn't say it enough. I should have been banging on the table when we were about to make the decision saying, hold up, guys, I don't want to be a barrier to the project, but I want everybody to understand the ramifications of the decisions we're about to make. And I didn't do that in an aggressive manner. So number one, I fell on the sword, right? I took accountability, right? And I think that falling on the sword and taking accountability, it propelled the trust, right? Because it wasn't somebody else's fault. I'm the leader. I'm over the IT department. I'm over security. Ultimately, whether it's my fault or not, I'm still the one who's responsible for it. And I think by being open and honest and transparent and saying, hey guys, I let the company down. This will never happen again. I think that kind of helped push my trust a little bit more. And with that, it allowed me to now bring in solutions and also make sure that they were heard that could keep us from being in this situation again. And so I would say to anybody who's been hit in a ransomware situation, own it, right? There's always that finger pointing. But at the end of the day, my CEO used to tell me, hey, if the company goes bankrupt, it didn't matter if the CFO was embezzling the money. I hired the CFO. So ultimately that falls on me, right? That falls on me for not doing auditing, for not doing monitoring, for not having relevant conversation with him on where we stood from a business. And I just take that to heart. Like, hey, that may cost you your job, right? I'm not saying that it's not. And you may be open, honest, and transparent. And they may say, well, you know what? We can't afford to have this anymore. We're going to have to, that very well may be the case, but at least you can leave with integrity, knowing like, hey man, I didn't throw anybody else under the bus. And I just feel like the universe is going to reward me with another opportunity and I'll learn from those mistakes.
I think that there's such a fear in being honest and taking accountability. And I think some companies and some leaders have done a really good job of showcasing their humanity to say, I made a decision, it didn't go the way we wanted, and stepping forward and failing forward, I believe is the term you like to
Yeah.
use. And I think in technology, we're sometimes a little bit more prepared because, you can test an idea, you can try to launch something, and because you know how you did it, you can reverse it, you can fix it, and you can make a very quick iteration cycle. But I feel that the business or other teams, if they make a mistake, it could be months to fix. And I'm wondering, in this new world we're in, where things are being developed and are being iterated upon so quickly, if this may be a place where those can take a bit more risk, knowing that if they do make a mistake, if there's something that happens, that it's not going to be a company ending thing,
Mhm.
but it'd be something we can learn and iterate from. Do you think we're going through a shift, or do you think we're still stuck at, if you admit something, your career's done?
I think we're going through a shift, and I think part of that is just because of the generation of leaders that are coming up. It's just by nature, model of the next generation of workers. They're different than we are. They're open, right? Their entire life has been open and honest and they've said what they felt, right? Whether we like it or not, right? They've come up, being in that space. And so I think by attrition, that's going to happen naturally, where we're going to have people who are okay. Heck, people are talking about their feelings now, and people are talking about, what they identify. All these things that have come up in the past couple of years have kind of made it be a case where we don't really have a choice but to kind of adapt to this model, especially those of us who are trying to get out of the workforce and those that are coming in. I think the other thing that is important to note is I think we're now at a place where we do get the whole companies accountable because we preach authenticity, right? We preach, you should be vulnerable in leadership. We preach those things, right? And so, in the same token, you can't punish me, right? Because I have the character of being, telling the truth and owning to my mistakes, right? And having the integrity. Because now you're going against your values and your principles that you promote all the time, right? And so I think we're in this dynamic where, hey, you told me it was okay for me to be authentic. You told me that that was the case. And now you're pulling back on that because of this event that happened and telling me, hey, I almost wish you would have never told me that because there's punishment that comes behind that. Right. We live in a world where we're saying these things. And I'm telling leaders, be cautious because this next generation isn't a generation of do what I say. They're a generation of do what I do. And if you say something, we know this with kids, it's like, why are you eating ice cream? They'll say, because you're eating ice cream. Right. That's what they're gonna respond with. And so we're in this place now where leaders and businesses have to be careful because the generation now that's coming up and some of the other leaders are taking hold of these truths and saying, why am I being punished for admitting that I made a mistake? Right. Especially if I'm openly admitting it before something ever happens that it brings down the organization. Hey, you know what? We had some issue with the server and I thought it was going to work and I tested it properly and it still didn't work properly. And I just want to let you know, we may get some phone calls in the morning because of this. That should be encouraged. I think the other thing that's happening right now is we're seeing companies we never thought get hit. I mean, when you think about CrowdStrike, when you think about MGM, when you think about last week, AWS, these are companies that most of the world is running on, right? And it's crippling the world. And I think that's bringing awareness to, okay, if it can happen to them, it surely can happen to us. We should probably talk about these things a little bit more in depth and a little bit more intently. And so we can bring the engineers into the room so we can understand how we sit as a business. The company that I work for now had their board meeting yesterday. The only thing that came out of there for IT is, hey, we need to make sure we shore up our DR because we've been seeing all these outages that have been happening. And we want to make sure we serve our patients and we can continue to serve our patients in the event that something happens. And that's the first time that I've been there. I've been there almost 2 years. First time that they've come out of board meeting where they talked about something I had been trying to do for 9 months but nobody thought it was important. Nobody wanted to sit down and have a tabletop exercise. And I'm like, guys, we got to know what to do in the event our phone system crashes and we can't reach out to our patients. What do we do? And now they're like, hey, let's have a concentrated effort. Let's get a task force together to make sure we understand what do we do in the event of those failures.
Absolutely. I think we're seeing a shift as well from compliance to what I call confidence.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is I think in the past it used to be, did I check this box? Did I get this certification? Did I meet my legal requirements? Did I satisfy the ask of, whoever was putting on this task on my shoulders? And I think we're now moving to a place where everyone says you need to trust the technology, you need to trust the data, you need to trust all these different layers. But I think there's a fundamental lack of confidence in knowing what is true.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, in your opinion, who has taken a step back, and is there a path that someone has taken to really build confidence, not only inside the business, but also to build confidence in their teams and to their customers?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody is doing it well. I think what's happening right now is technology is moving faster than we're ready for. I think we used to always say that, but growing up, we just didn't have as many coming at the same time, right? And I think right now, it goes back to, I think we missed the mark when we started to look at these newer technologies and let the buzzwords kind of drive us in that direction. And we have some foundational flaws that we just have not identified and we let kind of snowball, right? So when you think about, I tell people all the time, I teach around AI readiness. My first question is, what's your source of truth for your data? And if I ask HR, they got their own idea. If I ask marketing, they have their own idea. So it's like, guys, AI can only give you, we had this old adage, garbage in, garbage out. That's not new with AI. That's always been the case. Right? We've always said, hey, if you don't put in the right information, you're not going to get out the right information. And so I think it's hard to do well because nobody thought about data until you start talking about big data. And so you got departments who are housing their own individual data and they have their own systems that they manage by, but the company as a whole didn't have a source of truth. And so I think a lot of the foundational components we've gotten away from around governance and things of that nature. And I think that's preventing us from having an example of somebody who's doing it well. And so the reality of the fact is it is hard to trust. There are ethical concerns around who's making the decision and who to say they're the source of truth. And I think part of that has just become as companies have gone so far away from validation, auditing is not done anymore. Those are, non-impactful jobs from a fulfillment standpoint. I just got to audit. People don't want to do that job anymore, right? And so you got people who leave companies and still have access to their accounts, right? Because somebody didn't check off on all the steps that need to be done because I don't want an audit. That's the mundane task I don't want to do. I just think we've gone away from some of the foundational things that we need to kind of help push the technology ahead and allow us to trust what's being put out there.
I think that is so well said. And maybe there's ways that AI can help to fulfill some of those. I don't want to call it an audit, but at least the double checking and
Yes,
ensure there's
absolutely.
no gaps in place. And so, I kind of live in the Salesforce world, and they pushed last week or, a few weeks ago now, this big agentic enterprise. And it's the talk of most large businesses is how do we apply this new way of doing business? How do we accelerate, whether it's time to value or how do we increase shareholder value? And just this week, IBM laid off, I think, 20,000
Mhm,
people,
mhm.
Amazon, another chunk as well. And so there's this significant fear that's taking place. And sometimes these layoffs are being positioned that, AI is the source. And
Mhm.
if you dig a bit deeper for Amazon, you realize, well, they're just laying people off so they can free up cash to go buy more compute
Yeah.
power. And it
Uh,
has nothing to do about the AI automating people's jobs. So there's a bit of spin that we need to be aware of. But I think one of the biggest challenges that companies have is it's hard for a business to understand and to see their own challenges. It's looking inwardly, whereas a friend can come in and say, well, here's the issue. It's pretty obvious. For businesses that are needing to get clarity into what is really happening in their world, who can they turn to? What business entity can they typically go to? Or is there one that can come in and objectively say, here's where you're at?
yeah.
I
I
just don't know.
think we just overcomplicated it so much to where you're almost looking for the Avengers to show up and solve the problem, but the problem is pretty simple. I think number one, the business has to be open and honest and admitting, there's some areas that we are unsure about. And then I think number two, they have to be willing to trust the answer that's given to them, even if it's something internally that's already been said. I look at it like this: as a parent, kids never listen to their parents, right? I've mentored kids for 20 years. And whenever I would talk to the kids, the parents would be like, what do you say to get them to work? And I would go, I just said the same thing you said. They just need to hear from somebody different, right? It's not a magic pill. I wish it was the matrix was blue or red and you pick one and then whichever one you pick is going to lead you to a successful path. Business is still business. It's still the brick and mortar of a business. And sometimes I think we've gotten out of the way of understanding that. And I think we got to go back to what I said earlier. We got to go back to the foundations of having conversation, bringing in external auditors just to kind of, hey, I'm going to bring you in. I'm not going to do a security audit. I'm going to do a business audit. And I'm going to show you, hey, there's some gaps in your processes. And to your point, here's where you stand today. And I'm going to give you a roadmap of what you need to do to fix and satisfy those, those shortcomings that we identify. There's companies all over the world that would do that. It's just a matter of sometimes the business may be doing well and don't think they need that, right? Sometimes the business is doing bad and they can't afford it. Whatever those reasons are, I think the onus is still on the business to say, hey, if I want to go from A to B, I have to have the ability to self-assess. And if I can't, I got to find somebody who can do it for me, right? And I think that's hard for businesses because that's you looking in the mirror and saying, you know what? I have picked up a few pounds. I didn't want to really admit that, but this jacket is fitting a little bit snug now, right? I,
Muscles.
yeah, right. I got to get this. That's humbling, right? For you to have to. And so I always ask the question, do you want to say that? Or do you want your spouse to be like, hun, all right, you might want to lay off the fried burgers and fries, right? Whatever that is, right? I think companies got to have that awareness as well. And I think companies are so busy trying to make money, trying to acquire other companies, do mergers and acquisition, all those things. Sometimes they forget to take a step back and say, what got us to this successful point? Let's make sure we don't lose that.
I think it's interesting that sometimes when we're in the business world, we're trying to come up with new ways of solving or new ways of finding a path. But if you just take a step back and look at, well, how do we solve problems in our personal lives? And so I feel like today there's a lot of businesses that, for lack of a better word, they're sick. They're not feeling well. Something's broken. Something just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And internally, you might have those people telling you, well, here's the problem. And to me, it's like having a parent or a sibling saying, here's the problem. Or if you tell your kids, here's the problem, then, kids will say, well, you're my dad, or, you're my family. I'm only going to trust it so much. And so I think that there's a fundamental opportunity and a role for someone to play the role of a doctor. And what I mean by that is someone who is trained, someone who's objective, someone who understands how to run the tests, how to interpret the tests, how to present the information back, saying, whether you decide to do anything with this information is up to you, but I'm going to be impartial and I'm going to come in and I'm going to show you what your reality looks like. And so I'm wondering, have you run across any organizations or people, or what type of individual could play that role of being a doctor for the business, with the framing that they're not coming in to do surgery, they're not coming rip and replace, they're coming in to say, I know enough about internal medicine. I know enough about how our body, the business organism works, to know where there's issues.
Yep.
When you have concerns, know that I will not try to just push pills or prescriptions or evasive surgery on you, but I'm truly going to give you the understanding of what your body is doing. Is there anyone that plays the role of a doctor in a business context?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of opportunities there. Number one, anybody that comes into the organization new pretty much is your doctor because they have no idea about the decisions that were made prior to them getting there. The problem that most new people have is they don't want to say anything because they're still new and they don't want to rock anybody's boat. What I've done and what's been successful for me when I come into a new organization is I use terminology to my advantage. I'm going to remain curious, right? And so I'm going to ask, okay, so wait, so why are we doing that again? And it's, oh, we've always done it that way. I got it. But why have we always done it that way? And what I've started to notice is starting to make the people who are the stakeholders at least start thinking about like, well, shoot, I really don't know why we do it like that anymore. What do you think? It's a good opportunity. So now they become part of the conversation. It's not me just coming in. Nobody wants to be told what to do, right? Nobody wants somebody to come in and say, oh my God, you just got here. You don't even know how to run the business. You're trying to tell us what to do. So what I've done is because I'm new, I have a license to ask questions. Even if I know the answer, it's still a license for me to ask questions because I want everybody that's been in the room to start to really think about, why are we doing this? Oh, wow. I didn't even know I was hemorrhaging from the side until you said, hey, why is there blood on the floor? I've been hemorrhaging for so long, I'm just used to it now, right? I had no clue. It's like, wait, there's blood on the floor? And so now everybody now is looking at the blood. How did the blood get on the floor? And so now you start asking these questions because you're the new person, right? You're the person that now has the license to ask because you just genuinely don't know. I think it creates that opportunity now for the business to start looking at itself internally and saying, he raised some great questions. We just come in these meetings every day and we just say the same things and we get out of here. And a lot of times we feel like these are wasted meetings. Now you got somebody here challenging it. Hey, does anybody document that process in the case that somebody leaves or somebody's on vacation? We understand it now. And it's like, wow, we don't have that documented. So I think anybody new coming into an organization is by default a doctor, because you got to do an examination, right, of the organization, of the business practices, of all of those things, just so you can understand how to do your job. So by default, you're examining the company. And number one, you want to make sure you still want to be there. And number two, to my point, you got to know how successful you can be working with the people that you're working with. And so you're automatically examining those opportunities. The second thing I would say is they should, companies shouldn't invite people who normally isn't in the room just every now and then, right? If you got an up and coming leader, bring them in the room, because we treat diversity like it's a cancer or something, but it's like, I may have a different perspective that you've never thought about because I'm looking at it from a different lens that I can now bring out the best in all of us, right? I was a basketball coach for middle school girls for 8 years. Every day was a whirlwind, an experience, because, hey, we got this important game and my star player is crying because somebody didn't speak in the hallway. So every day there's this opportunity to self-assess where we are as a unit. And I had to learn, number one, I'm not an 8th grade girl, right? So I had to really, how y'all feeling today? When we go into halftime of a game, and I just use sports analogies because sports is the way of bringing us all together. I would go to halftime of a game, whether winning or losing. My first question would be, what are y'all seeing out there? What's working and not working for you all? And I give them the opportunity to say, well, we tried this play 3 times. It's never worked yet. I don't know why we keep trying. And it's like, you know what? You're absolutely right. What do you recommend? Well, they're playing me like this. And so in essence, they become the doctor who's evaluating themselves without even realizing it, because I've asked questions. And I think when you bring in diversity, when you bring in newer people who don't understand the context of how you guys are doing business, you by default become that examiner. You just have to make sure you're vocal in that approach.
I think that is such an apt way of putting it. I think you're probably one of the few that would come in and actually be bold and have the confidence to ask the questions. With there being so much disruption in the workplace right now, for those who are senior leaders who are being now almost ushered out, or massive restructuring where these companies are letting go of a lot of institutional knowledge, do you think there's a place, and do you think there's any hope for those leaders who have really the deep experience to provide that almost outside counsel, to provide that as a service to companies, to say, I'm not going to sell hours, I'll sell outcomes, or I'll provide outcomes. I'm going to come in, I will do this in this period of work, and I will come in and provide something that would take someone else 6 months. I can do it in 6 weeks because I know it. And that's something that is potentially a path for people that are going through a place of re-examining where their next step would be.
I think that's actually the next wave of business for most people who've been in their career for a long time, myself included. I think it's going to become, once people understand how to market it properly, which I think I've done, it's going to be a win-win for everybody, because I can now walk into a business with I've been in IT for almost 30 years, right? I've been in leadership for 20 of those years. I pretty much have seen it all, right? There's no way that a business, in my mind, should look at me and say, hey, I'm going to give you this approach. I don't want you to pay me high 6 figures. I want you to pay me an extremely low amount for this service that I'm going to provide for you. I can't be here 40 hours a week, but I am going to give you the value that you're looking for, the same way I would give you the value that you're looking for at a high 6-figure salary. The reality of the fact is, as an executive, you're pretty much an advisor anyway. You're just understanding what the business needs. What's your strategy? Okay, well, let me figure out how I can build IT into your strategy to make sure business outcomes are met. Pretty much that's what we do as executives all day long. We're pretty much advisory consultants, and we have a team around us that actually goes out and execute the work. Why wouldn't a company say, oh, well, I never thought about, wait, I don't have to pay you $400,000. I can pay you 100, and you can still give me the same outcome from an advisory perspective? I absolutely can. Once people understand that niche and how to sell themselves in that market and that model, it's going to be a game changer. Most people are afraid of entrepreneurship because they like the comfort of having a job. But to your point, there's just too much knowledge for people right now. When you think about doing due diligence for a merger and an acquisition, there's people who've gone through 10 of them in the roles that they've been in, who could provide, like, hey, I got a whole entire playbook on how to do a merger and an acquisition and have it ready in 30 days. There are people who actually are being laid off, to your point, who are experts in these things and don't even realize the value that they can bring to a company, or a PE firm who has always, or an investment group who's always looking to buy new companies, bring me on as your consultant. And I can tell you, hey, this is going to take you a little longer because I did an evaluation of the company and their IT is shot. They got security holes everywhere. If you bring this company on, you're going to risk being breached within the first 30 days of it. There's really a model out there for this. And I think the more people start getting turned off by the businesses and realizing, man, I poured my heart and guts and everything into this business. I've missed school plays and kids sporting events and all at the drop of a dime, I'm gone. I don't think I want to go back to that anymore. Even if the company sounds promising, there's always that chance that the economy is not going to do well. There's always that chance that, we're going to be in a recession. There's always a chance that the next government presidential candidate is going to have different ideals than the current one. It's going to drive everything crazy. There's always that opportunity. So I think to your point, there's a huge shift happening right now. And if people take note, there's a huge opportunity for people to I mean, you don't have to do an LLC, just 1099 yourself. And you'd be surprised how you can literally log in and chat GPT, give your roadmap of how to get businesses to kind of take on your services.
And I think to that, same vein of thought, I think consulting in itself is actually being cannibalized. And I think
Mhm.
companies are moving away from the time and material model to focusing on tell me what you're going to do, tell me how
Yep.
long it's going to take, and tell
Yep.
me how much it's going to cost. And if the value proposition is high enough, then it shouldn't matter how much time it takes.
Yep.
And so I think for those executives who can walk into a room, walk into an M&A situation and just walk in and just because they've done it, they smell it, they feel it, they walk around going, oh, this does not feel right. There's something wrong here.
Yeah.
They don't need, that traditional, well, tell me what you did for this hour and tell me what
Yeah.
you did over here. They can just walk in and say, I specialize in solving this problem in this amount of time. And if this is what you need help with, I can do it. Or however they package that. I think it's going to be productized services, productized experience, and productized thought leadership that I think is
Yep.
truly where the power is going to be. Because then you can market something because you're not marketing X amount per hour. And, I always think there's a shift in the marketplace when you start getting calls from overseas and they all repeat the same question of creating a market and how much. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
a bad script. And it means
Yeah.
that there's a fundamental, everyone's trying to fight to the bottom dollar. Everyone's trying
Yeah.
to bring the lowest cost resource. And in a world where you can use ChatGPT or a tool and get 80% of the answer for literally pennies and you fill them at 20%, I think that there's a need for authenticity, thought leadership in a place where, they can bring, for lack of a better word, a doctor in to say, hey, you've done 1,000 of these things. Here's what we're going through. What do you see?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I look at it like this. I think the average CIO lifespan is like 3 to 5 years. And the reason why is because they come in, there's a huge problem. They get the system, they get the organization to where they're pretty much on autopilot now. And then they either become expendable or they just go rinse and repeat somewhere else. I think those people who are getting laid off can actually say, you know what? I don't want to be here for 3. I'm going to get ahead of you. I don't want to be here for 3 years and I'm not anymore. To your point, I'm going to offer these services to you that's going to bring value and we'll figure out the timeline it's going to take. And then I'm done. I'm out. You can always call me back if you need me, but you guys are going to be on autopilot when I'm done. If the next 3 years, if you got another major decision you need to make, call me. But I'm going to go ahead and do what I've already been doing anyway. I'm not going to take the slow bleeding death. I'm going to go ahead and just say, hey, give me 6 months and I'll get you wherever you need to be and then we wash our hand. And so that's value to the company because they don't feel like I'm always in their pocket, right? To your point, I'm in and out. And now I get to go do this over and over again to these organizations. And now I sell myself as a service.
And I think, there's also an opportunity to have an advisory role where you're staying engaged, where you're not completely washing because you built the solution, you implemented
Yeah.
the fix, and sometimes they don't need 20 hours. They just need someone who's available to step in as needed to be that sounding board,
Yeah.
to be that voice of experience. And so I think there's a model that does work going forward because, just the rinse and repeat gets exhausting too.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
I
Yeah.
think there's a middle place, and I call it a done with you model.
Yeah.
But I think that is almost the sweet spot for a lot of people who don't know what the next step is.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And companies are now looking for, I think there's a shift in companies are now looking for, hey, I don't want to be in the news. Right. And so to your point, I might not have any project per se for you to work on, but I need to speak with you once a month from an advisory standpoint. And I need you to tell me, hey, what are we looking like hearing out there in the world? that I may not be aware of. So I can now start to look at what are they doing in the healthcare industry or the fintech industry or the like what's happening in those spaces with AI, things of that nature that we can talk about that I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the people that can go out there and solution those things for me, but you can. So once a month, we're going to jump on an advisory. Like there's a perfect model for that as well.
And especially if you specialize in a specific industry, if you've got
Yeah.
multiple clients, the problem someone else is facing might be the next problem you're about to face.
Yes, absolutely.
They can be proactive because they're living in that space to say, "Hey, I'm aware, I'm involved, I'm monitoring whatever that is," to be able to say, "Hey, I see that you're heading down this path and this could get ugly. Here's your options, and this
Yes.
is why you should take this step." I think that there is such an opportunity for those who have the battle scars and the wounds. And I think that it might take a number of us to start working together to start saying there's a different way of doing business.
Yep.
And, don't lose faith that there's more collaboration opportunities of, reaching out and you and I having a conversation like this so that when things do pop up, I can say, "Hey, I don't know anything about this, but Antonio's really, let me bring him into a conversation
Yeah.
because we can't do this on our own anymore.
Nope.
And this world is needing too much help of those who have experience to really share the solution and to do so where it benefits everyone." So
Yeah.
it's exciting times ahead. What would be some of your parting words of wisdom?
My book talks about, stop trying to be what you already are, right? There's so many people who've been defined by their titles, by their career, by their companies. And to your point, those people are now being laid off and they feel like they have no identity. And I just want to argue the point. You kind of do. You've been doing it for somebody else for so long. Maybe you should have some loyalty to yourself and pick yourself up and understand there's a place for you out here, right? To really lean into who you are and your God-given abilities. And then bring that to a business that can really be beneficial. And so I would just say to people like, hey, stop relying on the outside resources that we're relying on, whether that's your company, your government, or just believe in yourself, right? At the end of the day, believe in who you are and your gifts. You don't have to be, I'll never be Mike Summers. I can't. Even if no matter I can't grow hair, number one. So no matter how hard I try, I can't be him. And I shouldn't try. He can be the best version of himself. I can be the best version of myself. And I talk about this in the book. Go back and find out where you lost you at, right? Wherever that was, go back and find where you lost you and pick that up and go again. Right. All of us have this little child inside of us that we all had when we were kids that wanted to be these great things. And somewhere along the line, a lot of us lose that inner child. And that inner child is like, hey, I've been here the whole time. The one that had all these lofty dreams and life happened and you kind of went away from that. I'm still here. And I just think it's important for people to go back and find that and identify that and then move forward with that in mind.
So it looks like I have a book to read. Antonio, where can the viewers go and find this book?
It's on Amazon right now. It's called Stop Trying to Be a Leader. I'll tell everybody when you read it, it's going to be life-changing. It's nothing like you've ever read before because it is going to challenge you to kind of look at yourself in a different way.
Fantastic. I'm going to put a link to that book in the show notes. Antonio, this has been so insightful. You bring such a breath of fresh air, and I just think the lessons that you're sharing and bring that authentic self and sharing the failings and owning up to when they don't go right, it's not the end. And even
Yeah.
if the company you're working for may want to part ways, you can walk away knowing you did the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where true leadership comes in, because it's that story when someone says, "Why did you leave? And what was your experience?" Those who value that moral compass and that ability to just stand up and take ownership in difficult times, I think are the ones that will truly lead by example in the future.
Absolutely. I want to thank you very much for having me. I want to tell you, man, keep doing this. This is so needed. Real conversation is needed. I mean, we've gotten to the place where COVID took over and we start texting everybody and you kind of lose that humanity with connection. And I think connection is what keeps us all together. It kind of helps me realize we're not as different as we all like to pretend we are. Right. So keep doing this, man. I think this is valuable. I think this is important. I think it's necessary.
Fantastic. Well, Antonio, thanks for joining Heartbeat. I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you very much.
Antonio, that was fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me, man. It was pretty good. Like I said, keep doing the great work you're doing. I think it's phenomenal.
Enjoyed this deep dive? Hit like or drop a comment with your biggest Salesforce challenge and subscribe for more tactical insights. Know a CIO who has a story worth sharing? Tag them below or send us a message. We'd love to feature them next.